What if two little girls were so desperate for love? They asked a total stranger in a suit to be their daddy. They didn't know he was the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. They didn't know he'd just come from a funeral. And they had no idea. Their own biological father had returned with a dangerous plan. This isn't just a story about adoption. It's about trauma, second chances, and what happens when love refuses to give up even when the world does. Why did these girls have to beg for kindness in a park? Why was their mother living in hiding, afraid to speak the truth? And what made a man with everything suddenly risk it all for a family he never knew he needed? Each chapter of this emotional journey will leave you asking what truly makes someone a parent. Is it blood, or is it the courage to stay? Get ready to feel, to ache, to believe. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a moment of this powerful story. Now, let's begin with Asher Wilde didn't believe in interruptions. Not the small ones like a barista getting his name wrong, or a junior analyst forgetting his talking points, and certainly not the big ones. His time was mapped out in 15-minute blocks. His thoughts sequenced like clean code. There was a merger in Zurich waiting for his signature. A board meeting dialed in from 3 time zones, and 200 employees whose futures moved in step with his decisions. And yet, on a gray Tuesday morning in Boston's Logan International Airport, somewhere between Gate B5 and the private security lane, Asher Wilde was interrupted. He wore the kind of suit that whispered power, not because it was flashy, but because it fit perfectly. His coat was draped over his forearm. His assistant jogged 2 steps behind with a tablet and a duffel of documents, and the only light in his face came from the glow of his phone. He wasn't looking for anything, just the next checkpoint. Then he saw it. It was movement first, a flicker on the edge of his vision, just enough to break the rhythm. 2 little girls, still, too still. They were sitting on the floor, side by side, pressed so close their shoulders were touching. One held the handle of a gray suitcase so tightly that her knuckles were white. The other stared straight ahead, her chin tilted as if she was waiting for someone taller to finally come back. At first, Asher thought it was nothing. Parents stepped away all the time. Maybe the dad was getting coffee, or the mom was buying gum, but the more he looked, the more the stillness bothered him. Not scared, not sobbing, just waiting, with the kind of stillness that didn't come naturally to children unless they'd learned it was safer to be invisible. His steps slowed. Asher, his assistant, prompted. Glancing up from the screen, he waved him off. "Bored without me, you what?" But Asher had already turned. The noise of the terminal faded. People swept past in waves, wheeling carry-ons and sipping overpriced coffee. But no one looked down. No one saw the girls. He stepped forward. The older one blinked first. Her hair was tucked in 2 messy braids, shoes scuffed, a small smudge across her cheek like she'd tried to wipe away tears without letting anyone see. The younger one didn't move. She looked tired in a way that didn't match her age eyes too heavy, hands too still. Asher crouched down, knees creaking slightly in his tailored pants. He didn't usually kneel in airports, but nothing about this moment was usual. "Hey there," he said, gently. "Are you 2 waiting for someone?" The older one tilted her head, studying him, not like a child meeting a stranger, but like someone deciding if another promise was about to be broken. The younger one answered first, her voice so soft it nearly vanished into the air between them. "Our dad said we were flying later. But then he left. The sentence sat there, weightless and impossible, like it didn't belong in a terminal with sleek tile and glass windows. Asher's mouth went dry. Left, he repeated. She nodded. He told us to wait here, with the suitcase. A dozen scenarios raced through his mind. Divorce, miscommunication, a parent running late. But something deeper pressed against his chest the way the older girl didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't ask when her dad would return. She knew. "Can I ask your names?" he said quietly. The older one drew a breath. "I'm Ella," she said, her voice firm, almost protective. She glanced sideways. "This is June." Asher nodded, offering the smallest of smiles. "Hi, Ella. Hi, June. I'm Asher." June stared at him. "Do you work here?" "No, sweetheart," he said, and his voice cracked just slightly. "I'm just someone who saw you and wanted to make sure you were okay." Ella said nothing, but her grip on the suitcase shifted slightly, just enough for Asher to see the luggage tag. It was handwritten in dark marker, Bennett, E and J. No phone number, no address, just names. Asher stood slowly, turned, scanned the terminal. No one came running. No one looked back. No frantic parent in sight. Just people, moving forward, like always. He tapped his phone. "Call Marla Quinn," he said aloud. The line rang once before she answered. "You're supposed to be in the air by now. I need you to listen," he said. "There are 2 little girls. No parents. Just a suitcase and a story that doesn't make sense." Marla didn't need context. After 12 years as his personal counsel, she knew the sound of his voice when something cracked beneath it. "I'll call Child Protective Services," she said. "Stay where you are. Don't move them. Do not leave. I wasn't planning to." He ended the call and crouched again, his knees groaning. "Someone's coming to help," he said. "But until they get here, I'll stay right here with you." June looked at him, then at Ella, slowly. She reached her small hand forward and touched the edge of his coat. It was such a small thing. But Asher Wilde, a man who had built a life out of certainty and silence, felt something break open behind his ribs. The assistant never called back. The flight took off without him. But Asher didn't move from the floor of the airport. Not that hour. Not for a long time. Asher Wilde sat cross-legged on the cold airport floor, his wool coat pulled beneath him, shielding the chill that crept up through the polished tile. Ella and June stayed where they were, silent but aware of him, like 2 skittish deer who hadn't decided whether the stranger meant safety or danger. He wasn't used to being still. His life moved in a tempo of urgency calendars, KPIs, capital, and yet in this sliver of time, surrounded by rolling luggage and intercom announcements, he found himself anchored by the weight of their presence. Their quietness was louder than anything around him. Ella clutched the suitcase like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. Her chin remained lifted, as if daring the world to challenge her, but her eyes, brown, wide, and impossibly tired, betrayed something else. She had seen more than a child should. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but he knew from experience his own childhood that questions asked too soon could make someone disappear behind their silence. So he waited. June broke the quiet first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Asher, why did you stop?" He turned his head slowly. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Everyone kept walking. She looked around, lips pressed together, but you didn't. Why? The question pierced deeper than it should have. Because I know what it's like to wait for someone who's never coming back. Because I was that boy once, sitting on a church step with a lunchbox no one packed. Because I saw you, and it hurt in a place I forgot I had. Instead, he gave the only answer that made sense to say aloud. Because I couldn't walk past. Ella turned toward him slightly now, not fully, but enough to show she was listening, testing him, measuring him. He leaned his elbows on his knees. I don't mean to scare you. I'm not trying to take you anywhere. I just want to make sure you're safe until the right people get here. Grown-ups, people who can help. Ella spoke for the first time in over 20 minutes. No one helps. Not really. It wasn't defiance. It was resignation, a sentence that belonged to someone much older, worn down by broken promises. I'm sorry, Asher said softly. You don't even know what happened. You're right, he nodded. I don't, but I wanna. If you ever want to tell me. Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to respond but wasn't ready. And then June, unfiltered and gentle, piped up. Daddy said we were going to Grandma's house, but then he got mad on the phone. Really mad. He said, I don't care. I can't do this anymore. And then he told us to sit and wait. Ella flinched slightly. June, I'm not lying. I know, Ella whispered, but we're not supposed to tell people. June looked down. He's not coming back. As he Asher swallowed, his throat felt dry, and something heavy sat in his chest. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think it's very brave that you're here, and I promise you're not alone anymore. Just then, his phone buzzed. Marla. He stepped a few paces away to answer, still keeping the girls in view. They're alert, calm, no visible injuries, but they've been abandoned, he said quietly. Marla's voice came through steady. CPS is sending an agent to the airport now. Should be there in 30 minutes. I also flagged airport security in case we need footage. And Asher. The name on the suitcase, Bennett. I ran it. He braced himself. There's a missing persons alert from upstate New York. Mother deceased. Father Daniel Bennett uncontactable. History of instability. He was the one who filed the travel request to relocate the girls but never followed through. Custody was under review. God. Asher breathed. They were slipping through cracks. She said softly, You may have caught them just in time. He turned back toward the girls. Ella was rubbing a thumb along the stitching of her sleeve. June was humming softly to herself, off-key but sweet. They didn't know what was coming. Foster care, questions, paperwork, the slow, bureaucratic untangling of neglect. They needed more than a system. They needed someone. Asher sat back down beside them. Can I ask what you like to do? He said gently. When you're not waiting in airports. June's face lit up. I like drawing cats. I draw them on napkins, sometimes on walls, but I got in trouble for that. Cats are a solid subject. Asher smiled. Very respectable choice. Ella finally smiled too. Barely. But it was there. Asher felt something stir in him, something old, something he'd buried in the name of success, of control. He didn't remember the last time a child had spoken to him like he was human, the last time he had sat on a floor and simply existed with another soul. And then, without even thinking, he asked the question that would change everything. Where's your mom? June looked at Ella. Ella hesitated. She passed away. Last winter. Dad said it made things too hard. The sentence broke him open in a way he didn't expect. Because now he understood the silence, the tightness. The girls hadn't just been left behind, they had been navigating grief alone, and then discarded when it became inconvenient. He didn't even realize he was blinking back tears until June reached out and touched his hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to cry. We don't cry anymore." That was it. That single sentence leveled him. It was the way she said anymore, as if they'd tried, as if they'd spent months holding it in, hiding the sadness because no one could hold it for them. Asher didn't cry often, but this time, one tear did fall, silent, uninvited, honest. June didn't let go of his hand. When the CPS agent arrived, her name was Colleen Maddox. Tall, soft-voiced, deeply kind. Ella immediately stiffened. June leaned closer to Asher. "They're here to help," he said. "But if it's okay with you, I'd like to give them my number, in case you ever need me again." Ella blinked. "Why would we need you?" He looked at her, steady, because maybe sometimes having someone is better than having no one. Ella considered that, and then she nodded. Colleen took over gently, kneeling at the girl's level, explaining everything with warmth. It wasn't enough to erase their fear, but it was a start. As they walked away, Ella turned back once. She didn't wave, but she looked right into Asher's eyes, and something passed between them. Not thanks, not goodbye, something closer to don't disappear. And he wouldn't. Not this time. Not again. Not now that he had seen what he had tried so hard never to see. Asher Wilde stared at the empty gate long after the girls were gone. The airport resumed its rhythm, boarding calls, rolling luggage. Business travelers hunched over laptops, but Asher stood still, alone now with the ache that the girls had stirred loose. He didn't know how long he stood there. Long enough for the janitorial staff to pass by twice, long enough for the world to forget what had just happened. But Asher couldn't. When he finally moved, it wasn't back toward his private jet or the polished lounge reserved for platinum-tier flyers. Instead, he walked out of the terminal and into the early winter air, his coat too thin for the temperature, his chest too heavy for breath. The car was waiting, of course. A black Lincoln with a driver in a cap and a thermos of peppermint tea, just the way Asher liked it. He got in without a word. Marcus, the driver, glanced in the mirror, back to the office. Mr. Wild Asher hesitated. Back to the office meant boardrooms and budgets, reports and reassurances. It meant returning to a high-rise tower filled with people who smiled through their teeth and called him a visionary. But it also meant avoiding the weight that had just landed square in the center of his chest. "No," Asher said quietly. "Take me to Westfield Park." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He simply merged into traffic and drove. Westfield was 30 minutes away. A park tucked between old neighborhoods and forgotten schools. Asher hadn't been there in 20 years. Not since the night his mother packed what she could into 2 plastic grocery bags and walked him to a bus stop without telling his father. They'd sat on a bench near the fountain, his mother humming under her breath while he cried into his jacket sleeve, pretending he wasn't. He remembered her words like they were etched in stone. "It's okay to be scared, Ash. It just means you're paying attention." She died 3 weeks later. A stroke, the doctors said, too much stress, too little rest. She was 38. He had been 12. He never saw his father again. The limo pulled up to the curb. Asher stepped out, stuffing his hands deep into his coat pockets. The park was mostly empty, save for a few runners and a couple of kids playing near the swings. And there it was, the fountain. Smaller now, grayer, the tiles chipped at the edges, but the bench beside it still stood, slightly warped with age but steady. He sat down slowly. The wind rustled the bare branches above him. Somewhere nearby, a crow called out. He closed his eyes. For most of his life, Asher believed emotions were obstacles. They clouded judgment, weakened resolve, interrupted focus. He'd built his empire on detachment, on making decisions fast and never looking back. But today, Ella's eyes haunted him, and June's voice, that tiny, trembling whisper, had carved something open inside. You don't have to cry. We don't cry anymore. He'd spent decades pretending that didn't sound familiar. But it did. God, it did. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, expecting a barrage of messages from his executive team. Instead, it was just one, from Marla. CPS placed the girls in emergency foster care for now. Temporary. But the system is overloaded. I flagged a note in case anything changes. Let me know if you want to be listed as a contact. No pressure. He read the message twice. His thumbs hovered over the screen. What did he have to offer them? He was a man who barely remembered his own birthday. He hadn't held a child since his godson was a baby, and that kid was now in college. He'd walked away from his own family, his past, his grief, and built a tower so tall no one could reach him. And yet, here he was, thinking about bedtime stories, about hot meals and laughter and what kind of sketchbook June might like. He looked around the park again, searching for something that could ground him. His eyes settled on a small girl riding a scooter, her father jogging slowly behind her, both of them laughing. Pure, unfiltered joy. Asher looked down at his hands. When had they become so empty? And why, after all this time, did they suddenly ache to hold something not a company, not a legacy, but two girls in need of someone who didn't just walk away? He opened the message from Marla again and typed, "Yes. List me as emergency contact. I want updates, and if placement doesn't work out, let me know what I need to do. I'm not walking away." He hit send before he could change his mind. For a long moment, he sat motionless. Then, with a strange mix of dread and clarity, he stood. That night, his penthouse felt emptier than usual. Too many floors, too much silence. He wandered into the guest room he never used, opened the closet that held untouched sheets, and started laying out a bed as if the girls might show up any minute. He even caught himself folding towels with more care than he had in years. What am I doing? He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, then shut it again. Nothing in there was suitable for children, just overpriced sparkling water, a sad collection of condiments, and leftovers from a dinner meeting he didn't remember. He made a mental note. Stock real food, mac and cheese, apples, juice boxes. He sat on the edge of his bed later that night, the city humming below, his mind anything but still. He kept seeing her face, Ella, the way she guarded her sister with a stare that could cut glass, and June, who held his hand like it was a lifeline and told him not to cry. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself. He just knew they mattered. Not in the way troubled cases were assigned to charities, not in the way some people donated and moved on. No, he cared. In a way that made his chest hurt, that made him question everything. Why did two girls abandoned in an airport crack something open in a man like him? Maybe because they reminded him that there was once a boy who waited too, and maybe that boy never stopped waiting. But now maybe he could be the one who showed up, not because he had to, but because he could, and because someone needed to. 2 days passed. Asher Wilde didn't sleep well either night. He couldn't stop wondering where the girls were, what kind of room they were sleeping in, whether they had warm pajamas, whether June still clutched the stuffed bunny she held so tightly at the airport. He hadn't heard anything since agreeing to be listed as an emergency contact. It shouldn't have surprised him. Foster care was a bureaucratic maze even for insiders. He wasn't family, wasn't a guardian, wasn't even sure what he was yet. Just a man who stumbled into something and couldn't walk away from it. At 7 sharp, he called Marla. I need everything you can find on their case. I don't care if you have to bend some rules. Find me their social worker, the placement family, school enrollment status, medical history. I want it on my desk before lunch. There was a pause on the line. Then Marla said gently, Asher, you know this is complicated. You're not legally involved. I want to be, he said. Tell me what I have to do. By 10:00 a.m., she'd arranged a private meeting with someone who could help a retired family court judge named Leslie Rowan, now consulting part-time with the county's Child Welfare Division. Marla had once helped her daughter get a college scholarship through Wilde Foundation. Now she was calling in the favor. Asher arrived at the judge's brownstone on the Upper East Side wearing his usual gray coat. But today it felt heavier than usual. When Judge Rowan opened the door, her eyes flicked over him with quiet assessment. She was in her late 60s, sharp features, still wearing pearls like armor. Mr. Wilde, she said, voice even. This isn't a merger. You can't fast-track children like you fast-track tech. I don't want to fast-track them, he replied. I just want to keep them safe. She tilted her head slightly, stepped aside, and let him in. Her home smelled like black tea and wood polish. No nonsense, like her. He sat on a floral couch that squeaked under his weight and watched her stack legal pads, files, and folders across the coffee table between them. I reviewed the case. Ella and June Bennett. Their mother, Callie Bennett, died in a car accident just outside Phoenix 6 weeks ago. No father on record. Extended family unresponsive or unfit. Girls were placed with a short-term foster provider 2 nights ago. The arrangement is temporary max of 30 days unless a long-term placement is found. He leaned forward, heart tight. What's the foster family like? She gave him a hard look. They're decent people, overcrowded, underpaid, tired. They mean well, but the system isn't designed for children like these girls. Ella's traumatized, not just grieving. And June, she may look small, but she's already learned to parent her sister. Asher nodded slowly. That's what I saw. Judge Rowan opened a manila folder, pulled out a photo. This is their school enrollment packet. They haven't been re-enrolled yet. The foster family says it's on their to-do list. He took the photo in his hands, just a simple image of 2 girls standing beside a social worker, their faces blank, their bodies stiff. But it gutted him. They don't belong in that system, he murmured. Neither do hundreds of kids, she replied. He looked up at her. Then, what do I do? She didn't answer right away, just poured 2 mugs of tea, set one in front of him, and said, You file a motion to become a kinship guardian. Unorthodox? Yes, but not impossible. You'll need to provide temporary housing, legal representation, and undergo background checks and psychological evaluations. Then, If the court approves, you'll get emergency custody. But the question is, are you in this for the photo op or the long haul? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at the photo again. June's hand was gripping her sister's sleeve like it was her only lifeline. He thought of his own mother again, of the bus ride, of sitting in a stranger's office while people decided his future like he was furniture. "I don't need a photo op," he said finally, "but I think I need them more than I realized." Judge Rowan gave a single nod. "I'll make a call to the department head. If you're serious, things can move quickly." By afternoon, Marla had booked the first home inspection, found a child psychologist for evaluations, and secured a top family lawyer. The Wilde penthouse staff began rearranging the guest rooms, installing twin beds, locking the liquor cabinets, and converting the home office into a study nook with art supplies and bean bags. Asher worked late that night, but not at the office. He walked through the apartment again and again, trying to imagine what a child would notice. Would they find it cold, too quiet? Would June be afraid of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows? He ordered blackout curtains and glow-in-the-dark stars. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because no one had ever put stars on his ceiling, not even his mother. And now that he could offer them to someone else, it felt like a small beginning. That night, he stood in front of the mirror and tried to practice what he'd say when he saw the girls again. He kept failing. Everything came out wrong, too stiff, too careful, too rehearsed. So he gave up, looked at his reflection, and simply whispered, "Please let them be okay." The next morning, his lawyer called. "They've agreed to allow you a supervised visit with Ella and June at their foster home this afternoon. 30 minutes, max, where he asked. Queens, you'll need to be discreet. They don't want the media catching wind of a billionaire CEO showing up at a foster home." He showed up anyway. No suits, no security, just jeans, a navy sweater, and a small cloth bag filled with sketchbooks, markers, and 2 small plush owls. The house was small, beige, and cracked with the wear of too many years and too few hands to care for it. Inside, the air smelled like microwaved pasta and lemon floor cleaner. Children's voices rang through the walls. Asher sat at a dining table that wobbled slightly. He clutched the bag tightly in his lap as the door opened. Ella walked in first. Her hair was down today, but her eyes were still guarded. She spotted him instantly, stopped, arms crossed. Then June peeked out from behind her. Her face lit up. "You came," she whispered. Asher's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said, "I came." June ran to him and hugged his arm without hesitation. Ella stayed still. "I brought you something," he said, gently offering the bag. "You don't have to keep it. Just thought you might like to draw again." Ella didn't take it. Not right away. But June reached in and pulled out the markers with glee. "They're the fancy kind," she gasped. Ella's eyes flickered just once. Then she stepped closer and quietly took the sketch pad, flipping through the pages like she didn't want to look interested. "Thanks," she mumbled. June climbed onto his lap like she'd done it 100 times. Ella stood nearby, silent but watching him like a hawk. That 30-minute visit stretched into an hour. No one noticed, or maybe no one wanted to end it. When it was time to go, June clung to his shirt. "You'll come back?" she asked. He looked at her, then at Ella, whose eyes were suspiciously wet though she blinked hard. "I promise," he said. "And this time, I'll stay." The courtroom wasn't what Asher Wilde expected. He had imagined something grand, with high ceilings and gleaming wood, but the family courtroom in Lower Manhattan was cramped and fluorescent, more like a DMV than a cathedral of justice. Rows of metal chairs, water-stained ceiling tiles, and the faint smell of stale coffee in the air. He sat alone in the back row, clutching the manila folder that Marla had handed him an hour earlier. Inside were letters of reference, proof of financial stability, photos of the renovated guest room, a notarized affidavit of intent, and psychological evaluation results that described him as a high-functioning, emotionally restrained adult male exhibiting signs of early life trauma and exceptional adaptive control. He'd read that line 3 times before silently agreeing with it. Emotionally restrained. That was polite for guarded. And maybe it was true. Still, this wasn't about him. Not today. At the front of the room, a short woman in a gray skirt suit was reviewing documents with a young social worker. Ella and June sat quietly to the side. Ella's chin was lifted just enough to make her look defiant. June was scribbling something in a notebook, tongue poking out slightly. They both wore the same second-hand jeans and zip-up hoodies from the Foster family. Clothes that didn't fit quite right. Asher couldn't stop staring at their shoes. Ella's laces were mismatched. June's sneakers were too big. He remembered what that felt like wearing someone else's life and pretending it fit. The judge, a bald man with thin glasses and a nameplate that read Hahn. Matthew Kessler called the room to order. The social worker stood up first. Her name was Teresa Mullins. She looked exhausted but kind. Your Honor, we're here today to discuss temporary guardianship placement for Ella and June Bennett. The current Foster family has reached capacity and cannot extend care past this week. We have 3 open placements, none local, all outside the borough. Asher felt his stomach twist. Out of the borough meant away from their school, their friends, what little stability they had left. However, Teresa continued, we have received an emergency motion for temporary kinship guardianship filed by Mr. Asher Wilde. The judge peered over his glasses. Mr. Wilde, please approach. Asher rose, walked steadily, felt every eye in the room on him, including Ella's. She was watching him again, not scared, just searching. He stopped at the table and cleared his throat. I filed the motion because I believe removing them from this city, from each other, from what little is familiar, would be harmful. I'm prepared to offer a stable, safe environment where they can heal. I have no biological relation to the girls, but you encountered them at LaGuardia Airport by chance. The judge interrupted. And, within 48 hours, you filed for guardianship. That's correct. You understand how unusual that is, I do, he said. But so is finding 2 children alone at an airport trying to fly across country by themselves. The judge leaned back. Why you, Mr. Wilde? He hesitated. It wasn't a question he could answer with a resume or bank statement. He looked at Ella, then down at his hands. When I was 8 years old, he said, voice low, my mother took a bus across the state line and left me at a shelter. Said she'd come back when she got clean. She never did. Silence. I spent 3 years in foster care. Different beds, different rules, learned to be invisible. I got lucky. I got out. Most don't. He looked at the judge directly now. I don't want Ella and June to get lucky. I want them to be chosen, on purpose, by someone who won't leave. The room was still. Then the judge looked down at the paperwork. You're a public figure, Mr. Wilde, CEO of a tech conglomerate. You're single, no history of parenting. I know. You're under media scrutiny. Your past relationships are tabloid fodder. You've been called emotionally unavailable by no fewer than 4 ex-partners. Asher gave a short, humorless laugh. That sounds about right. And yet, the judge continued, you are still pursuing custody of 2 grieving children who are not related to you and whom you've only known for, what, a week? Asher nodded. Yes. Why? He paused, and this time, he didn't speak right away. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Because when June looked up at me in that airport, she wasn't asking for charity, she wasn't begging, she was offering something sacred. What was that a chance, he said, to do it differently than the people who hurt her. A chance to show her, both of them, that they're not invisible, not disposable. I can't undo what they've been through, but I can be a safe place for them to land. The judge didn't respond right away, just nodded slowly, then turned to the girls. Ella, do you want to speak? Ella stood. Her voice was quiet, but steady. I don't trust people fast, she said, but Mr. Wilde showed up when he didn't have to, and he didn't try to fix us or lie to us. He just sat with us. She hesitated, then added, that's more than most adults ever did. Then she sat down again. June waved her hand excitedly. I want to say something, too. The judge smiled. Go ahead. June bounced to her feet. I like his snacks, and his house smells like books, and he knows how to draw really good owls. That got a chuckle from the clerk. Then she added, softer, and he listens, even when I'm quiet. The judge looked at the girls, then at Teresa, then finally back at Asher. You will undergo bi-weekly home checks, mandatory therapy coordination, and financial oversight for expenditures related to the girls. You're not permitted to move them out of state without court approval. I understand. Then the judge said, this court grants emergency kinship guardianship of Ella and June Bennett to Mr. Asher Wilde, pending formal review in 90 days. Asher didn't move. He felt the weight of it land in his chest all at once. June squealed. Does this mean we get to go with him? Ella didn't speak, but her fingers gripped the edge of her seat. Judge Kessler smiled for the first time. Yes, you do. Outside the courthouse. The air was colder than Asher expected, or maybe it was just that he was breathing differently. Ella and June walked beside him. He wasn't holding their hands. Not yet. But June kept skipping slightly, bumping into his leg like she was testing whether he'd stay close. He did. Ella said nothing until they reached the car. Then she looked up at him and asked, What now? He opened the door, gestured for them to get in, then, quietly, said, Now we go home. The townhouse on West 73rd Street had never felt like a home. Not really. It was a beautiful place, clean lines, exposed brick, soft leather furniture, and curated art in neutral tones. Everything had been hand-picked by Asher's design team. He remembered approving the mood boards, the paint swatches, the architectural renderings, but not once had he chosen anything because it felt like him. It had always been a showroom, a space to impress clients, dates, investors. Now, it held 2 duffel bags with glittery patches, a stuffed cat missing one eye, and a pink toothbrush that didn't match anything in the house. And for the first time in years, it felt alive. Asher stood in the doorway of the guest bedroom as June leapt onto the bed with a shout. "This is bouncy like, really bouncy," she said, her curls flopping with each hop. "Can I bounce while I sleep?" Ella stepped in behind her, more reserved. She eyed the room, the clean linens, the fairy lights strung across the headboard, the bookshelves newly stocked with middle-grade novels and graphic books. Her gaze lingered on the window. Then the corner where a small desk had been set up with coloring pencils. June rolled off the bed dramatically. "Can we paint the walls?" Asher blinked. "You? Want to paint the walls? Yeah, like purple, or rainbow, or stars that glow in the dark?" "Right. Ella." Ella shrugged but didn't say no. Asher smiled faintly. "We'll see. Maybe we can figure it out together." June beamed. "That means yes." It didn't. Not yet. But for now, he let her have the win. That night, after they'd eaten homemade grilled cheese, burnt, slightly, on one side and tomato soup from a carton. Asher found himself sitting on the living room floor building a Lego set with June, while Ella curled up nearby with a book. He hadn't touched Legos since he was 11. His fingers fumbled with the tiny pieces, and June kept laughing at his inability to tell a sloped brick from a hinge plate. At one point, she looked up at him seriously and said, "You're not like the other grown-ups." He paused. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Good," she said. "You ask us stuff, like what we want. Most grown-ups already decide before asking." Asher swallowed. Ella didn't look up, but she added softly, "And you don't pretend everything's okay." He didn't respond, just nodded and handed June a tiny window frame. Later, after they'd both gone to bed, Ella in the guest room. June insisting on a blanket fort on the floor beside her sister's bed. Asher stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet. It wasn't silence, exactly. It was the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the heater, June's soft murmurs as she talked in her sleep, Ella's breath, steady and even, though a little too shallow. He could tell she wasn't fully asleep. She was keeping watch, like he used to. The memory surfaced without warning his own first night in a foster home. The smell of unfamiliar laundry detergent, a lumpy mattress, the thin sheet that barely reached his shoulders, the way he'd kept his shoes on, just in case. He returned to his own room, sat down at the desk, and opened his laptop. There were hundreds of unread emails. The PR department wanted a quote about his philanthropic rescue. Shareholders wanted reassurances. Someone had sent over mock-ups for a viral campaign, Wild for Kids CEO turned guardian angel. He closed the lid. None of that mattered right now. He wasn't a campaign. He was a man trying to make breakfast tomorrow without burning it. The following morning, he woke up to giggles in the kitchen. When he walked in, June was perched on the counter with flour on her nose. Ella stood beside her, holding a whisk like it might explode. "We're making pancakes," June announced. "You're making a mess," Ella corrected. Asher took in the sight half a dozen eggshells, batter dripping off the counter, syrup already spilled, and milk left open beside the sink. He should have scolded them. Instead, he reached for an apron. "Let's do it right," he said. Together, they made lumpy, imperfect pancakes that tasted like vanilla and sugar and something warmer, something like laughter. That afternoon, they walked through Central Park. June collected acorns and chased squirrels. Ella remained quiet, watching dogs pass, occasionally smiling at a child on a scooter. They sat on a bench by the duck pond, and June climbed onto Asher's lap, arms wrapped loosely around his neck. "Do we have to go back?" she asked, pressing her cheek to his shoulder. "No," he said gently. "This is your home now, if you want it." Ella didn't speak, but she didn't walk away either. That night, Asher found her in the study, standing in front of one of the framed photographs on the wall. It was a picture of him at age 25, standing next to his late mentor, Sylvia Moreau. They were at a startup pitch competition, grinning like fools, holding up a plastic trophy. Ella tilted her head. "You look different back then. Less gray hair," he said, stepping beside her. "And your eyes were different, not so heavy." He was taken aback by her observation. She looked up at him. "Do you miss her?" He nodded. "Every day." "What happened?" "She had cancer. It moved fast." "I'm sorry," Ella said quietly. "Me too." She hesitated, then reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing. Pencil on lined notebook paper. 2 girls, a tall man, a townhouse with stars painted on the windows. He looked at it for a long time before speaking. "This is beautiful," he whispered. "It's not finished," she said. "I don't know what color your eyes are yet. They're brown. Not just brown," she said. "They're tired, but kind of soft." He blinked, surprised by the lump in his throat. She turned to go, then paused at the doorway. "Thank you for not giving up." Then she disappeared into the hallway, her bare feet making no sound. Asher stood in the study long after she'd gone. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay awake, wondering if he was doing this right, if he was enough, if loving them quietly, consistently, patiently would make up for the years they'd lost. He had money, a house, a legal team, but he didn't have all the answers. He only had his presence, and somehow that had to be the start of something sacred. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning, just as Asher was walking back from the market with a bag of fresh produce tucked under one arm and June's favorite raspberry yogurt balanced precariously on top. He'd just learned that June loved raspberries. Ella preferred strawberries, but only if they were sliced and chilled, and neither liked orange juice with pulp. These were the things he was learning, quiet details that most parents probably picked up over time. Asher was making up for lost years in groceries and bedtime stories and burnt pancakes. He had just pushed the front door open when his phone buzzed. Unknown caller. He let it go to voicemail, but it rang again. Same number, something in his gut twisted. He answered. Asher Wilde. A long silence, then a voice low, male, strained. "You've got my daughters." Asher froze. He stepped into the kitchen slowly, set the bag down, and leaned against the counter. "Who is this?" "This is Benjamin Bennett," the voice said. "Their father." Asher didn't respond. "I want to see them." Asher's jaw clenched. "You lost custody 3 years ago. You disappeared. You abandoned them. I made mistakes," Benjamin said, "but I didn't know where they were. I didn't know how to get to them." Asher closed his eyes for a long beat. "And now you do." There was a pause. "I saw the news clip, the photo of you holding June. I recognized her." Asher's heart pounded. He glanced down the hall toward the living room, where he could hear the soft hum of a cartoon and June's giggle bubbling behind it. "You're not coming near them," Asher said, voice tight. "You don't get to decide that," Benjamin snapped. "You're not their father." Another pause. And then, more quietly, "Not really." Asher's hands curled into fists on the counter. "Don't call this number again," he said. "If you come near them, I'll have you arrested." He hung up, but the damage had already been done. The anxiety stayed with him all day, blooming behind his ribs, tugging at his focus. He canceled a board meeting, ignored calls from the office, and spent the entire afternoon in the townhouse half watching the girls, half listening for footsteps at the door, a knock, anything. By dinner, he was unraveling. He didn't want to scare them, but they noticed anyway. Ella watched him closely as he fumbled with the kitchen towel, eyes distant. June asked, "Are you sick?" "No," he said, "just tired." That night, after tucking June into bed, he found Ella sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of warm milk and her sketch pad. She looked up as he entered, but didn't speak. He sat down across from her. The silence stretched. Then she said, "He called, didn't he?" Asher blinked. "Who, my dad?" The way she said it, flat, emotionless, made Asher's stomach turn. Yes," he admitted. "Have found my number." Ella's pencil hovered over the page, then dropped gently onto the table. "I knew he would. Sooner or later." Asher didn't know what to say. "I saw the news," she said, "at the shelter. When they showed your photo, I knew it would lead to him. He's always looking for someone to blame." "Ella, he's not safe," she interrupted, her voice suddenly shaken. "If he comes near June." Her eyes flooded, but she blinked rapidly, trying to stop it. "He won't," Asher said, reaching across the table. "I promise. I'll do whatever it takes." She didn't take his hand, but she didn't move away either. "Can I sleep on the couch tonight?" she asked quietly. "You want to? I want to hear the door, just in case." Asher swallowed. He didn't argue. That night, he watched her curl up under a blanket, eyes open in the dim light. She faced the door, always the protector. He sat in the chair across from her, watching the door too. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The next day, he met with his attorney. "I want full legal guardianship," Asher said. "Permanent. I don't want Benjamin Bennett anywhere near them." His attorney, a calm woman named Lena Morales, adjusted her glasses. "You're filing for sole custody." "Yes. You'll need to show he's a danger. There's already a restraining order from the original custody case, which helps, but he can contest. He shouldn't get the chance. He will. That's how the system works." Asher ran a hand through his hair. "Then we fight." Lena studied him for a long moment. "You really love them, don't you?" "I'd burn the world down before I let him hurt them again." "Good," she said, "because he will try." Benjamin didn't wait long. 2 days later, a letter arrived, not from him, but from his lawyer. He was filing for reinstatement of parental rights, claimed sobriety, claimed stability, claimed regret. Asher tore the letter in half. He didn't show it to the girls. Instead, he doubled down, called therapists, scheduled evaluations, met with social workers. He opened the girls' college funds that week. He put their names on health insurance, dental care, and a line of emergency contacts. He started sleeping in the chair outside their rooms. One night, June padded out barefoot, holding her plush cat. She looked up at him sleepily. "You don't have to stay there," she said. "We're okay now." He reached down, brushed her curls from her face. "I know. Do you miss your dad?" she asked. He blinked. "Sometimes. He died a long time ago." What was he like, Asher thought for a long time. He was quiet, but when he loved hard, even if he didn't say it. "Like you?" "Maybe." She smiled, then went back to bed. He stayed in the chair anyway. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The air in the townhouse changed. Ella grew quieter. June clung more. One morning, Asher found them sitting on the floor of the hallway, backs to the wall, legs drawn in. They looked so small. Ella had her arms around June, whose eyes were red. He crouched down beside them. "What's going on?" Ella didn't answer. June looked up. "Are we going back?" "No," he said gently. "You're not. But the judge, what if he says Asher took her hands? No one is taking you away from me. Not now. Not ever." June nodded slowly. Ella finally spoke. "Do you swear?" He looked into her eyes. "I swear." The courtroom was colder than it should have been. The walls were beige and bare, the windows tall but frosted, muting the outside world like it didn't want anyone to know what happened inside. Asher sat stiffly on the bench, wearing a navy suit that suddenly felt too tight in the chest. His hands were clasped, unmoving, except when he rubbed his thumb over the knuckle of his index finger over and over. June sat between him and Ella, too young to understand all of it, but old enough to know it mattered. She clutched her stuffed cat, Olivia, which Lena had managed to argue for as a comfort item. Ella sat with her shoulders back and her eyes down, jaw tight. Benjamin was late. When he finally entered, Asher's breath caught. He was thinner than the photograph in the custody records, shorter than expected, dressed cleanly, but it felt performative. His eyes scanned the courtroom, landing on the girls, then on Asher. No reaction. Asher studied him, trying to see what the girls must have once seen. A father, a protector, a name they whispered in the dark when they cried, but all he saw was a ghost in skin. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Rhonda Barnes, took her seat and brought the room to order. "Mr. Wilde," she began after preliminary statements, "you're petitioning for full and permanent guardianship of Ella and June Bennett. Correct? Yes, Your Honor. You've submitted extensive documentation, financial records, home evaluations, therapy letters, even personal statements from school staff." "Yes." Judge Barnes looked at him over the rim of her glasses. "Are you aware that you are not biologically related to either child?" "Yes, and yet you still wish to adopt them." Asher didn't hesitate. "Yes, they are my daughters." A hush fell over the room. No one said a word. Even Benjamin didn't speak. The judge nodded slowly. "We'll return to that." Mr. Bennett Benjamin stood, adjusting his tie. "Yes, Your Honor. You're seeking reinstatement of full parental rights. You've submitted claims of sobriety, therapy, and employment, but your record shows history of neglect and domestic violence. Are you prepared to respond to that?" Benjamin straightened. "Yes, I've changed. I've made mistakes, but I've paid for them. I love my girls. I want to make things right." From the bench. June shifted in her seat. Her grip on the stuffed cat tightened. Ella reached over and gently took her hand. The judge reviewed the documents for a long time before speaking again. "I will allow testimony," she said. "Mr. Wilde, would you like to speak?" First Asher rose. He hadn't prepared a speech. He had words, thousands of them, but none of them had ever felt like enough. So he spoke simply. "When I met Ella and June, they were alone at an airport with nothing but a suitcase and a note. They were scared, hungry, exhausted, and still they protected each other like soldiers in battle." He looked at Benjamin, then back to the judge. "I didn't plan to become a father. I didn't know I needed to. But these girls, they taught me what it means to show up every day in the small ways that count. Morning cereal, homework, nightmares, stomach bugs, dance recitals. I didn't do any of it for recognition. I did it because I loved them. Not like a stranger, like their dad. He paused, voice catching. Love isn't just DNA. It's what you do when no one's watching. What you're willing to sacrifice. I would give up everything for them. That's not biology. That's commitment. He sat down. June reached over and grabbed his hand without a word. Benjamin was called to the stand next. He painted a careful picture therapy sessions, AA meetings, warehouse job, rental apartment with 2 bedrooms. He claimed change, claimed remorse. Then he looked at the girls. I know I let you down, he said, but I've learned, I've grown. I want a second chance, just one. Ella stood up without asking. The courtroom murmured, but Judge Barnes nodded. You may speak. Ella stepped forward slowly. I don't want to go back, she said, voice flat. He didn't just make mistakes. He left. When Mom died, he didn't hold us. He drank, yelled, took money that wasn't his, and then he disappeared. June was still sleeping with the nightlight because she was afraid he'd come back. June's bottom lip trembled. I don't care if he's better now. He doesn't get to come back and pretend like it never happened. She looked at Asher. He's our dad now. Judge Barnes nodded. Thank you. Ella. She resumed her seat. Everyone was quiet. The judge turned to June. Would you like to speak too, sweetheart? June hesitated, then whispered, No, ma'am. That's okay, the judge replied gently. You've been very brave. After closing statements, the judge adjourned for deliberation. 27 minutes later, she returned. This court recognizes that parental rights are sacred, she said, but they must be earned. Mr. Bennett, while your efforts are acknowledged, they are not enough to counter years of documented abandonment and trauma. Benjamin closed his eyes. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. He pulled it away. Asher Wilde, the judge continued. This court grants you full and permanent guardianship of Ella and June Bennett. You may begin formal adoption proceedings at your discretion. Asher exhaled, deeply and shakily. He looked at the girls. Ella's chin quivered for the first time in weeks. June started to cry, quiet, relieved tears. She climbed into Asher's lap without asking. Pressing her face to his chest, he held her tightly. Ella didn't cry. She just leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, Thank you. When they walked out of the courtroom, the sun had come out. The cold had broken. It was still winter, but for the first time in months, it didn't feel endless. They stopped on the courthouse steps. Benjamin watched from a distance, alone, jaw clenched, face unreadable. Asher met his gaze for a moment. He didn't nod. He didn't wave. He just turned back to the girls, took their hands, and walked down the steps together, toward something new, something real, something they could finally call home. They didn't throw a party. No streamers, no cake, no clapping relatives pretending to care for photos. After the court ruling, Asher took the girls home, and the first thing they did was nothing. They dropped their coats on the rack, kicked off their shoes, and collapsed into the living room like runners after a long race. June curled up in her favorite corner of the couch, her stuffed cat tucked under her arm. Ella sat cross-legged on the rug, staring at the fireplace, which Asher hadn't even turned on yet. The quiet didn't feel heavy for once. It felt earned. He moved into the kitchen, made grilled cheese sandwiches, and poured tomato soup into the chipped white bowls they liked best. No garnish, no fancy plates, just warmth. They ate at the kitchen counter, side by side. Asher didn't say much. He watched them eat, chew slowly, eyes a little glassy, like they were unsure if this was real. And then June whispered something that nearly shattered him. "We're not going to disappear now." "Right?" He put down his spoon. "No. June, you're not going anywhere." Ella didn't say anything, but she reached for his hand, her grip stronger than usual. He let it stay there. That night, they built a blanket fort in the living room, something the girls hadn't asked to do in months. Asher dragged out all the old quilts and tied them with clothespins to chairs. The girls filled it with flashlights, stuffed animals, and snacks. Inside the fort, under a glowing yellow lantern, they told stories. Silly ones, ghost ones. They took turns inventing new characters with strange voices. And then, as the wind pressed against the windows, Ella asked a different kind of story. "Can we talk about Mom?" Asher nodded. Always. And so they did. June shared how Mom used to sing while brushing her hair. Ella remembered the sound of her laughter, how she'd clap when she laughed, as if surprised by her own joy. They remembered the way she smelled like lavender and cinnamon, how she made pancakes shaped like animals, how she cried when she thought they couldn't see. Asher didn't try to fill in the blanks. He just listened, let them remember. Later, when they'd finally drifted to sleep inside the fort, Asher stayed awake. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at their faces. He thought about how love had snuck up on him, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the small, ordinary things. Morning waffles, tangled shoelaces, cheering from the back row of school plays, holding their backpacks when they were too tired. He used to think love was something you either had or didn't. Now he knew it was something you chose, over and over again. In the morning, they woke up with the sunlight streaking through the blankets, and June said, "Can we make pancakes?" Asher smiled, animal shapes. She nodded. Mom made giraffes. He burned the first few attempts. They ate anyway, laughing over a misshapen turtle and a slightly terrifying elephant. That afternoon, Lena stopped by with paperwork, adoption proceedings, final signatures. She brought balloons because she said she couldn't help herself. Ella popped one by accident and jumped. June burst into giggles. They signed the papers together, Asher Wilde, father, legally, permanently, no more temporary guardian, no more pending review, just theirs. After Lena left, they celebrated the way the girls wanted, by watching old cartoons, wrapped in fleece blankets, eating popcorn in mismatched bowls. That night, Ella brought out a shoebox she'd kept under her bed. Inside were small things, a locket, a faded photo of her mother, a note from first grade, a drawing of her and June holding hands with a tall stick figure labeled Dad. She handed the drawing to Asher. "It used to be someone else," she said, "but I think it's you now." He didn't cry. He just reached out, pulled her into a hug, and said, "I think so too." A few weeks later, the adoption became official in court. They didn't go back to the big courthouse. They held the final declaration in a small, sunlit room with just a judge, Lena, and a clerk. June wore a dress with glitter stars. Ella wore jeans and a jacket and wouldn't stop bouncing her knee. The judge, a kind man with silver hair and soft eyes, smiled warmly, "Congratulations, Mr. Wilde," he said. "They're yours." "No," Asher corrected, holding both their hands. "I'm theirs." They went out for ice cream afterward. It was 38 degrees outside. June got strawberry with sprinkles. Ella chose coffee flavor because she said it made her feel grown up. Asher got vanilla. Simple, solid, just right. They sat on a bench by the river walk, wind whipping past, spoons clinking gently in paper cups. Asher looked at the two of them. The cold had turned their noses pink. Ella was leaning against his shoulder. June was humming under her breath, and he thought this is what family feels like. Not perfect, not easy, but chosen, safe, whole. Later that evening, they made a time capsule. It was Ella's idea. She wanted to bury it under the oak tree in the backyard. Inside, they placed a photo of all three of them on the courthouse steps, June's favorite hair clip, a list of rules for our family they'd written on a napkin together. Rule 1. Always listen. Rule 2. Never lie about feelings. Rule 3. Love each other even on the hard days. They placed the items in an old tin lunchbox. Asher dug a small hole beneath the tree. Ella lowered it in. June covered it with earth and patted it flat. "When do we dig it up?" June asked. 10 years, Ella said. "Or when we forget how we got here," Asher added softly, "so we can remember." They stood there a while, watching the wind sway the branches, and something settled between them. Not silence, not even peace, but presence, and that was enough. Asher hadn't been to a school parent-teacher conference in 20 years, not since his godson Ethan was in 3rd grade, and back then, he'd just shown up as a favor, sitting in the back while Ethan's mom did all the talking. But this time was different. This time, he was the parent. He wore a navy sweater over a crisp shirt, the kind his assistant used to dry clean on rotation when he still bothered with media appearances. He'd ironed this one himself. Slight wrinkle at the collar, but close enough. June clutched his hand like it was an anchor as they walked through the linoleum halls of Chestnut Grove Elementary. "Will Mrs. Harrow ask me about the glue incident?" she whispered. "What glue incident?" June smiled slyly and said nothing. Ella walked a few paces ahead, arms crossed, hood up, her way of managing nerves. She was still adjusting to the new school, still testing how much of herself to show. They stepped into the classroom. A half-circle of tiny chairs surrounded a reading rug, and children's art projects lined the walls, paper owls, finger-painted suns, and a surprisingly detailed drawing of a dragon labeled toothless but still dangerous. Mrs. Harrow was kind-eyed and efficient. She talked about June's kindness, her leadership during group activities, her tendency to narrate her thoughts out loud, even during math tests. "She's wildly imaginative," Mrs. Harrow said, smiling. "We're still working on the whole raise your hand before speaking thing." June beamed. Later that evening, they attended Ella's conference. Different school, different tone. Middle school held a harder edge. Everything smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and hormones. The hallway lockers were dented, and someone had written "Trust Nobody" in red marker on the water fountain. Ella's English teacher, Mr. Darby, had wire-rimmed glasses and a measured voice. "She's brilliant," he said. "Sharp thinker, but reserved." "She's had to be," Asher replied softly. Darby nodded. "She's writing essays that read like short stories. There's pain there, but control too, a kind of careful shaping of the wound. She gets that from her mother," Asher said. "The control. the wounds her own, driving home that night. The car was quiet for most of the ride. Then, just before they reached the corner with the mural of dancing foxes, Ella spoke. "You don't have to come to all my stuff, you know." Asher kept his eyes on the road. "I know, but I didn't hate that you did." He didn't smile, just nodded once. "Cool," she said, and turned up the radio a notch. At home, June fell asleep halfway through her favorite storybook. Asher carried her to bed, tucked the covers up beneath her chin. In the hallway, he passed Ella's door. Light peeked under it. He paused, knocked once. "Come in." She was at her desk, sketching something. It looked like a treehouse, not whimsical, functional, ropes, pulleys, platforms. "Want me to leave you alone?" "No," she said, then added, "but don't sit weirdly quiet either." So he sat on the floor, cross-legged like he used to when coding for 16 hours straight. "Did you mean it?" she asked after a minute. "Mean what?" "When you told Mr. Darby the wound was mine?" Asher paused. "Yes." She looked at him, eyes serious. "I didn't ask for all this." "I know, but I didn't ask you to fix it either. I'm not trying to fix it." She raised an eyebrow. "Okay," he amended. "Maybe I was at first, but now I'm just trying to be here." Ella's pencil stopped moving. That helps more. Outside, thunder rumbled, rain tapped gently on the windows. The next week brought something Asher hadn't anticipated. An invitation. The school's spring showcase was coming up, and June had been selected to narrate the opening performance, a musical version of Where the Wild Things Are. Ella had volunteered to do stage lighting, mostly to avoid being on stage herself. "Will you come?" June asked over breakfast. "Of course." She nodded solemnly. "Then you need to meet the PTA moms." He nearly choked on his coffee. The PTA meeting was on a Thursday evening in the school library. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of stale coffee lingered in the air. He walked in, feeling like a piece of antique furniture dropped in a modern showroom. They all looked at him, some in recognition, some in curiosity, a few in judgment. He could read people like code. He saw the polite smiles, the subtle glances toward his wristwatch, still a limited edition Cartier, and the way two women leaned in and whispered when they thought he couldn't hear. That's him. That's Asher Wilde, the billionaire, the recluse, the one who just showed up with 2 girls and a story. Asher sat through the meeting quietly, took notes, nodded when appropriate. Afterward, as he was leaving, one of the mothers approached him, tall, blonde, with a voice that had too much sugar and not enough sincerity. "So brave of you," she said, hand on her chest, taking them in like that. "They're my daughters," he said evenly. "Of course, I mean, spiritually." He didn't answer. Another mom, this one, shorter, dark curls tied in a loose bun, stepped forward. "I'm Nora. My kid is in June's class. We're glad you're here." Her tone was simple, no condescension. He nodded. "Thanks. I heard about your former life," she added. "So have I," he said dryly. She laughed. "Well, if you ever want a break from all this, we have a book club. It's mostly wine and complaining, but it helps." He took the card she handed him. That night, he stared at it on his kitchen counter. Book club. He hadn't read fiction in years, hadn't allowed himself that kind of escape. But maybe, now, he needed different stories. On the morning of the spring showcase, the girls were a whirlwind. June rehearsed her lines in the mirror. Ella taped paper stars to the lighting board and muttered to herself about angles and dimmers. Asher ironed shirts and found matching shoes. He even packed snacks. At the school auditorium, he sat in the front row. When the curtain rose, June stepped forward, her little voice clear and proud. "Let the wild rumpus start." The crowd chuckled and clapped. Asher's heart thudded against his ribs. He'd faced boardrooms, courtrooms, even Senate panels. Nothing had ever made him more nervous than watching her speak. And then, for a flicker of a second, June looked at him. She smiled and kept going. After the show, Ella met him backstage. She killed it. She said, "So did you. I was just pressing buttons. That's what most of life is." He replied. She rolled her eyes, but she smiled too. Later, as they walked home under a soft spring rain, June skipping ahead in her star-covered boots, Ella turned to him. "Do you ever regret it? What, letting us in?" He didn't answer right away. The rain pattered on his jacket, steady and calm. "No," he said finally, "but I do regret not finding you sooner." Ella didn't like hospitals. They reminded her of waiting rooms, of things breaking down quietly, slowly, like a machine that no longer clicks into place. She and June sat side by side in the elevator, the kind with gray rubber walls and an old inspection sticker curling at the corner. June clutched a paper crane she'd folded for her mother. "Do you think she'll like it?" June asked. "She'll love it," Ella replied. They stepped out on the fourth floor, into the scent of disinfectant and faint anxiety. The oncology wing was quieter than the rest of the hospital, less urgent, more patient, like everyone here was learning how to live while facing the unspoken. Asher waited by the nurse's station. He had brought flowers, soft pink tulips, Sarah's favorite. It had taken a dozen calls to find them this time of year. "She's awake," he said. June rushed ahead, skipping lightly down the hall. Ella walked slower, shoulders tense. Sarah looked fragile, but not weak. The chemotherapy had thinned her hair, but her eyes were sharp. The tulips made her smile. So did June, who climbed gently onto the bed and handed her the crane. "For good luck," June whispered. Sarah kissed the top of her head. "You're my good luck." Ella stood by the window, arms crossed. Sarah turned to her. "You okay, sweetheart?" Ella shrugged. "Better than you. It wasn't meant to be mean. It came out that way anyway." Sarah didn't flinch. "I'm still here." Ella nodded, but didn't move closer. "You scared me." "I know, and you didn't tell me." Sarah sighed. "I didn't want to burden you." Ella turned sharply. "You're my mother. You don't get to protect me by lying." Asher started to speak, but Sarah held up a hand. She looked at her daughter. Really looked. "You're right," Sarah said. "I'm sorry." Ella's jaw clenched, but she stepped closer, just a little, just enough. Later, Asher sat beside Sarah as the girls went to the cafeteria. Sarah leaned back, her voice soft. "They're doing better. They are. You, too." Asher chuckled dryly. "It's not about me. It never was. That's what makes it work now." He looked at her, eyes steady. "You really think they're healing?" Sarah nodded. "Kids are stronger than we think, but they need space to be angry. Especially Ella. She's got that. And the silence, too. She's been holding the world up for too long." Asher sighed. "I know the feeling." Sarah studied him. "What do you want?" "Asher. Really." He hesitated. "A life that's honest, not perfect, just not hiding anymore." She smiled faintly. "You're doing it." When they returned home, the girls went to bed early. Asher stayed up, sorting paperwork in the kitchen. He was reviewing custody transfer forms, not because anyone had asked him to, but because he wanted it in writing, in case Sarah got worse, in case anything happened. In case. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find a man in a gray suit holding a briefcase. Sharp eyes, cold smile. "Mr. Wilde, I represent Mr. Nathaniel Cortez, Ella and June's biological father." Asher's breath caught. "He's dead." The man raised an eyebrow. "Hardly. He's seeking partial custody." Asher's voice dropped. He abandoned them. Legally, he was never stripped of parental rights. And now that Ms. Bennett is ill, Mr. Cortez believes the girls should be with blood. Asher's jaw clenched. He left them to rot. The man offered a card. "He'll be filing for emergency review. I suggest you prepare." Asher slammed the door. He stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. Nathaniel Cortez. He had hoped never to hear that name again. In the morning, he called Sarah. "I need to come by," he said. Sarah's face drained of color when he told her. She sank into the bed like gravity had doubled. "He can't," she whispered. "He won't. He's going to try." Sarah's voice trembled. "Asher, you have to stop him." "I will. We need a lawyer. I already called one." He placed a file on her tray. "He's good and discreet." Sarah nodded. Then she started to cry. Not loud, not hysterical, just a soft breaking. The way ice splits in a lake. "I thought I had more time," she said. "You still do?" She shook her head. "You don't understand. Nathaniel doesn't want them. He wants to hurt me. He won't get to—" Sarah looked up. "Promise me." Asher leaned in, took her hand. "I will protect them. I swear to you." That night, Asher sat with Ella in the living room. He told her the truth about Nathaniel, the lawyer, the hearing that might come. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at him, then at the floor. "I don't want to go with him," she said. "You won't?" Ella's voice was low. "Do you believe in blood more than love?" Asher blinked. "No." "Then fight like you don't." In her bedroom, June was asleep, curled around her stuffed owl, oblivious, safe for now. The next morning, Asher met with the attorney. Her name was Meredith Yoon. Sharp, precise, relentless. "He's filing for joint custody based on lack of legal guardianship on your part and your romantic relationship with the mother," she said, flipping through a file. "We need to establish de facto parenting." "What does that mean?" "It means you've acted like their father. We need witnesses, proof, routines, school involvement, health appointments, emotional bond. I've got all of that. Then we're halfway there." "What's the other half?" Meredith looked at him squarely. "Your past. My past. You're a public figure. Mr. Wilde. Any hint of instability, reckless behavior, or mental health history, they'll use it." Asher nodded slowly. "I've made mistakes." "Then make your redemption louder than your regrets." In the following days, Asher began building the case. He gathered letters from teachers, notes from doctors, statements from Sarah, even handwritten ones from June. Ella refused to write anything. "I'll speak for myself," she said. Meredith didn't argue. She's articulate. Let her be heard. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Each night, Asher read to June, walked Ella home from school, took them to their favorite bakery, all while preparing for war. He hadn't felt this much pressure since he was 29, pitching a prototype to venture capitalists with nothing but a napkin sketch and hope. This time, the stakes weren't money, they were love. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, Asher sat on the porch, staring at the stars. Sarah came outside, wrapped in a shawl. "He's not going to win," she said. "I know." She sat beside him. "I wish I'd told you sooner. About him. You did what you had to. He scares me. He doesn't scare me." Sarah looked at him. "What does Asher?" Hesitated. "Losing them? You won't." Asher looked at her. "You sound so sure." "I am. Because for the first time, you're fighting for something real." The courthouse smelled like old wood and paperwork. Ella sat on the bench outside the hearing room, back straight, arms crossed, her hair pinned up the way Sarah used to do it when she was nervous. June leaned against her, quietly humming to herself, the crane from the hospital tucked into her coat pocket like a secret. Asher sat across from them, suit pressed, heart pounding beneath it. He'd pitched companies to billionaires, walked through firestorms of press, managed disasters, and stared down boardrooms filled with sharks. But this was different. This was blood against love. Sarah was not well enough to attend. The doctors had insisted. Stress will do more damage than rest will heal. So she had stayed home, wrapped in a blanket, watching the clock and trusting the man she once wasn't sure she could ever trust again. Meredith Yoon arrived like a storm in heels, papers in order, evidence compiled, tone unshakable. She offered Asher a single nod. "You ready, no?" He answered, "But I'm not going anywhere." Inside, the room was sterile, quiet, far too calm for the emotion buzzing under every skin cell. Judge Clarissa Monroe, firm but fair, presided with sharp eyes and a gentle frown. Nathaniel Cortez sat at the opposite table, clean-shaven, dressed in calculated humility, but the cold in his gaze betrayed the mask. The proceedings began with procedural questions, names, roles, timelines. Then came the witness testimonies. Teachers spoke first. Mr. Wilde picks them up every Tuesday, comes to every conference, signs every form. A pediatrician. He's the emergency contact. He was the one who took Ella in when she had pneumonia, June's vaccinations. He coordinated all of them. Even the mailman was called in. I see him every morning walking them to the bus. Knows all the neighbors. Always waves. When it was Sarah's turn, her statement was read aloud, a letter, shakily written, painfully honest. Asher Wilde is not the man I once feared he might become. He is the father my children needed, the partner I never thought I deserved. I trust him with my daughters, my life, and my legacy. Asher couldn't breathe as the letter ended. Ella reached under the table, found his hand, and squeezed it. Then it was Nathaniel's turn. He stood, clearing his throat dramatically. "I know I made mistakes," he began, "but I'm a changed man. I've found faith, structure. I want to be there for my daughters now. They deserve their real father." Meredith stood slowly. "Mr. Cortez, how many birthdays have you attended in the past 5 years?" "None. I wasn't welcome." "How many support payments have you made since their birth?" He shifted. "I wasn't financially stable." "How many calls, letters, even drawings? Anything?" He paused. The room waited. "None," he finally muttered. Meredith nodded. No further questions. Then Judge Monroe looked over her glasses. "I'd like to hear from the children." June was called first. She bounced up to the witness seat, legs swinging as she sat. Do you know Mr. Wilde? He's Daddy, she said without hesitation. Do you know Mr. Cortez? June frowned. No. Do you feel safe with Mr. Wilde? She smiled. Yes. He makes pancakes with whipped cream. The judge chuckled softly. Thank you, June. Then came Ella. She didn't flinch. She walked to the chair and sat with a quiet, collected defiance. Ella, you understand why we're here? Yes, ma'am. Do you wish to live with your biological father? No. Why not? Because blood doesn't make you family. Love does. Judge Monroe blinked. And has Mr. Wilde loved you? He's the only man who stayed. When Mom got sick, when I was scared, when June had nightmares, he stayed. Every night, every moment. That's love. Nathaniel leaned forward. Ella, sweetheart, I'm your real dad. Ella turned her gaze to him, cold and cutting. Real dads don't vanish when you're 5. Judge Monroe held up a hand. That's enough, Mr. Cortez. Silence fell. Then she turned to Asher. Do you wish to adopt them officially? Yes, Your Honor. If Sarah permits and if they want it? Yes. Absolutely. She nodded. I'll take the case under advisement. We'll reconvene Monday. But as she stood, Ella rose. Your Honor, she asked softly. Yes, child, you don't have to wait. You already know. The judge paused, then smiled. You're right, I do. Her gavel struck once. Joint custody petition by Mr. Cortez denied, full legal guardianship, pending final adoption procedures, granted to Mr. Asher Wilde. This court recognizes the best interest of the children lies not in biology, but in stability, love, and lived truth. Asher closed his eyes, just for a second. Ella rushed into his arms, and June squealed from her seat. You're our forever daddy now. That night, they returned home, exhausted but light. Sarah waited at the window, and when she saw them, she cried not the tears of fear or pain, but of relief. Later, they sat on the porch. Sarah curled against Asher's shoulder, breathing easier than she had in weeks. I heard, she whispered. Guess the whole courthouse did. Thank you, she said. For what? For fighting. He wrapped his arm around her. I didn't fight for them. I fought because of them. They gave me something worth standing for. Sarah closed her eyes. Then maybe this whole broken thing gave us all a second chance. The next few weeks blurred with paperwork, appointments, follow-ups, but the most important moments were quiet. June learning to tie her own shoes with Asher clapping, Ella making her first solo presentation with Asher recording it on his phone, Sarah, stronger now, walking a little more each day with Asher at her side, and one evening, in their living room, June crawled into his lap and asked, Now that you're our real daddy, can we have a real wedding, Sarah, from the kitchen? Raised an eyebrow. Asher laughed. That's not how weddings work, baby. Ella, reading on the couch, added without looking up. She means you and Mom, obviously. Sarah froze. Asher looked at her. What do you think? Sarah smiled. I already said yes the day you stayed. A few months later, they gathered in a sunlit backyard under strings of fairy lights. Sarah wore a simple dress. The girls wore flower crowns. Asher cried twice. There were no grand vows, no speeches, just 4 people standing in the space between sorrow and grace, building something lasting. Asher knelt beside the girls after the ceremony. You two saved me, he whispered. Ella rolled her eyes. You saved us too, June added. Now can we get cake? And they did. That night, After the guests had gone and the candles had dimmed, Asher stood under the stars. Sarah joined him, quiet and still. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" she asked. "All the time. You were just a man in a suit, on a bench, and you were a woman with 2 wild daughters." Sarah smiled, and now he looked at her. "Now we're a family, in a world that often values power, wealth, and bloodlines. This story reminded us that love isn't measured in DNA or status. It's shown in presence, in protection, in persistence. Asher Wilde could have walked away, but he didn't. Sarah could have given up, but she chose hope. And 2 little girls, Ella and June, proved that sometimes children are the bravest of us all. This wasn't just a courtroom battle. It was a fight against emotional abandonment, against invisible scars, against the kind of quiet cruelty society too often ignores. It was a stand against the belief that fathers can disappear and still claim the title when it's convenient. Let this story be a call not only to love deeper, but to recognize and challenge every act of quiet injustice, especially against women and children who deserve safety, not silence. If this story moved you, if you saw pieces of yourself or someone you love in it, please like, share, and subscribe to support more powerful, truth-rooted storytelling. Your engagement keeps these voices alive and these stories heard. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, love loud, protect quietly, and never underestimate what presence can heal.